Welcome to Pet Business Disruptors. I'm Clayton and I'm here today with Anne Carlson, the founder of Jiminy's Dog Food, um, the US, if not the world's first ever insect protein dog food. Um, so, a real trailblazer in the alternative proteins market, something that's really gained a lot of traction. How are you today, Anne?
I'm doing well. Really happy to be here, Clayton.
Yeah, no, awesome. So, Anne, yeah, tell us all about it because obviously you're a trailblazer in this area. You started off doing insect protein, and again, now that the industry has become very black soldier fly larvae orientated, you started with cricket protein, which you don't see so much. And so, yeah, tell me what made you sort of go cricket protein dog food. That's the way I see the future.
We started with the crickets because they really are the gateway bug, the easiest one for the consumer to wrap their head around. We now have a portfolio that's mixed. It's pretty much 50-50 cricket and black soldier fly larva, which I think is fantastic. And at some point in the future, I'm hoping to add mealworm as well. I think it's important to give the consumer some choices, and there's some benefits that are different between the different types of insect proteins. But taking a step back, yep, we are the first. Started this thing in 2016, got the first product to market in 2017, and they were all cricket treats.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I say, I think like the crickets have really like not been no I don't think even anyone's even attempted it in the UK or in Europe particularly. It just seems to have gone between mealworms and black soldier fly. And when you think about it, crickets were probably the most mass produced insect, so it's interesting that it's never really been a thing in the dog food market. But in the human food market, like, so we have a company over here called Yumbug who make cricket burgers, for example. So, and there was a range of barbecue flavored crickets and stuff went into our supermarkets, but it's never really hit the dog food market. So,
Well, it is more expensive, so it's more expensive to raise the crickets, and therefore, as a ingredient, it is more expensive. But there is a real benefit to starting with something that the consumer can wrap their head around, especially when you think about it. Our end consumer, are the dogs, and they can't buy it for themselves. So you've got to have something that appeals to their owner, and they're buying it as if it is their baby. It is, whenever I think about this category, I think about it as similar to baby. You basically look at your dog and say, does he like it? And he can't tell you. So you're basically going off of his reactions. So it has to sound good to the consumer, and then they have to see that the dog loves it.
yeah, and like, oh wait, that's always my thing. I think when people come into the industry, I think they don't see how many relationships you need to marry together to get to the final consumer, which is the dog. Like, because look, we have to satisfy what the dog likes, so it's got to taste good. But then we also have to satisfy what's pleasing to the consumer. But then on top of that, like, a lot of consumers, they want added benefits. They want to, because their dog is their baby. They want to give it the best they can give. It's very different to, let's say, when I walk into a store and I buy a drink for myself. I'm not thinking I want something that's healthy and I go in and buy like energy drinks and garbage like that, because I don't even you have a different thought process when it comes to yourself, or even, let's say, your adult kids, for example. Like, so it's a very different process, and so actually getting your head around that is actually quite tough.
That's so true. I mean, I eat healthy, but I slip up and every once in a while, and I'll have a craving for ice cream, and I indulge myself. But when I look at my dog, I am always thinking about his health, and I actually I don't slip up very often with him, even with like table scraps, because I know that they have too much salt, they have too much sugar. I really care about his health and making the right choices for him. Similar to when my daughter was a baby, I felt the same way, and I was really careful with her.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about insects as well is, I think, when you started, it was like pretty controversial, insect-based dog food. Whereas I think Whereas I think now we're actually a lot more people. There's a lot more brands. There's a lot more people doing it, and I think there's a lot more like acceptance, but also knowledge around it. But how was it in the beginning? Like, because it's got to be a hard sell.
It actually was really interesting to see people's reactions. We went to our first trade show in 2017, and when we said, "Yeah, these treats are made with cricket protein," people would be, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." And then all of a sudden they'd go, "Wait, what?" And you'd have to like back up and talk about why are we using this unusual protein, this novel protein. And so, yeah, a lot of education right from the get go. But the other side of it was that when we first started, it wasn't approved in the U.S. So we had to pay for the science, and that was a hard start. So the first 3+ years, we were doing the work to prove out that it was digestible for the dogs, it had utility, it was safe, that it was prebiotic. And those were all peer-reviewed studies that all went into a GRAS dossier, GRAS being generally recognized as safe, in order for us to go beyond treats and go into the food market. So we really took on a lot right from the get-go. I didn't realize quite how hard it would be when I first started. I knew that there was this thing called AHVMA and the FDA that we were going to have to work with. And coming back to you saying, when you said you have to work with a lot of people, oh yeah, it is tough at times. There's a lot of work that sits behind this, but it's so important because the work that we did set the groundwork for this entire industry.
I see. I didn't even realize, to be honest, that you actually had to change the regulations because I mean, obviously, where I've come into the insect industry sort of later. I mean, look, in 2016, I was still distributing pet food like amongst stores, and I had like a big catalog of products. So it's not something I even thought of. Obviously, now it's like in the UK we have more regulations, I think, than the US. So we can't feed dried insects to chickens still because they're worried about Chinese product coming in, which has been fed on problematic substrates. But yeah, I didn't realize actually that you had to go to that level of work to actually get that going.
And I actually thought it would be easier when I first started because, when you come right down to it, insects are a natural part of a dog's diet. So I thought it would just be, oh, well, just prove out that dogs have been eating this for thousands of years. It's a key part of their natural diet, all different types of dogs. In fact, there are some dogs, some wild dogs, that are called insectivores. There's several different types of foxes. There's coyotes that all eat insects as part of their diet, and not just a little part of their diet. In some cases, it's the main part of their diet. So I thought it would be easier because of that, but little did I know you still have to go through all the science and prove it out.
I mean, so during that time, obviously that's like a. I mean, I guess were you selling the treats initially, or like
We
the
were, we were, but it was a little tricky because we were under the radar. So you couldn't. There were certain states where you could sell it and it wasn't problematic, but there were others where they said, well, it's not on the AFCO list of approved ingredients, and so we're going to pull it off the shelf. And as a little guy, that's kind of painful. But we were able to get the GRAS dossier through in 2020, and parallel path there were people working on BSFL. So we worked on the crickets. Our partners worked on the BSFL, and we were able to launch our food in get this, March of 2020.
just in time for COVID. It's funny because actually that's the same time I exited my business was March 2020, and like I was planning on like doing some traveling and stuff. So yeah, I think March 2020 has a lot to answer for, to be honest.
I do too. Talk about shifting everybody's, career path, life path, everything. But I gotta say, what it did for us is it made us focus more on the DTC part of our business, which was basically non-existent at that point. We had been focusing on the independent pet stores. And that became problematic because they were only doing curbside delivery. People were not walking through the stores, so discovery wasn't happening. So for us, really having to switch gears and think about direct to consumer was a good thing. There were a lot of people who were online and starting to change their purchase behaviors, but also doing research online. So it gave us this forum for talking to the consumer and educating them directly rather than having to go through the store.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. So I think the weird thing for COVID was is that I remember when it happened. I remember thinking this is actually going to really boost the trade because it's kind of like when people are locked away and they can't travel. I think that pets is always a natural thing. I always used to say we were in the anti-recession industry because when people have got no money, they instead of going on holiday, instead of buying a nice car, they'll buy themselves a pet. And so I think that kind of happened on steroids during COVID, which has its problems, but it also gave like a chance for a lot of brands to really get out there because I think people had time on their hands. They were prepared to spend time to make sure they research food. And I think in that sense, I think, yeah, look, compare it to where we are today. It's much harder to actually get seen online now than it was during COVID. So, in some ways, it probably wasn't a bad thing, to be honest, to launch at that time online, you know?
We grew rapidly during that period. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing privately held companies for the last 3 years in a row. And I think I can attribute a lot of that to what happened during COVID, the adoption of more pets, but also the consumer getting online and researching.
Yeah. I mean, how did you like finance the business from the start? Because obviously America is such a massive country, and I have obviously I've got like experience trading in America, and it's a massive undertaking as a country to like really get the stuff out there because it's huge. Like distribution costs are really high. State to state, there's different regulations. Like people in every state are so different. I mean, people in California are very different to people in Arkansas, or are very different to people in Michigan. You know, it's like a it's like an English speaking Europe in terms of like everyone's so different. And I think like as a European, we often look at America as like this homogenous whole. But how did you get going and finance your growth?
Well, at the very beginning, it was really finding people who believed in the vision. And so, as we were starting in 2016, I kind of laid out this is what we're going to go after. And just back up for a second and tell you how I got here. I've worked in consumer packaged goods my entire career. I started actually in consulting. So I was hopping around from category to category and company to company, working on different kinds of issues. It's a great way to start a career though because you get to see all the different aspects of various companies because you're jumping in and trying to solve problems. So you have to really understand how it works. But then I went into industry and again hopping around categories a little bit. I did quite a bit in the alcohol beverage space. I started my own company back during that time, sold that to IRI. Coming out of that, I wanted to stay close to home, so I ended up going to work for Del Monte. And at the time, Del Monte had the canned food business and the pet business. And what happened, we were acquired by private equity almost as soon as I walked in the door. And given my background, I got tapped to do the project to say, okay, where is the profit in this business? What should we do? And it was a great opportunity because I was able to look at the business across both of the business units and say, well, all of the opportunity is over here in this pet business. And so we ended up selling off the canned food business, rebranding as a pet company, and then we ended up getting acquired. And of course, that was like within a year we were acquired. So I knew I didn't want to leave California. So I was trying to decide what I wanted to do next. And as I was thinking about what the future could hold, I was having a conversation with my daughter who's about to go off to college, and thinking, "Oh, this is going to be fun." We're both talking about where are we going next, but then she kind of dropped a bombshell on me. It was one of those "Mwah, mwah, mwah" moments where she tells me she doesn't want to have kids, and she was worried about what the world was going to be like by the time they grew up. She was talking about climate change. And so as we were talking, I realized I couldn't just do a normal job after that. Building a better future for her was everything. So that's when I changed direction and started thinking differently about what I wanted to do into the future. And, as I was thinking about it, I realized I really loved working in the pet industry and that there was a huge opportunity within the pet industry. I saw the UN study. Well, first I saw the UCLA study that said 25 to 30% of the environmental impact of meat consumption in the US is due to our dogs and cats. And I was like, okay, if we think about the protein differently, we probably can do a hell of a lot better. And then I saw the UN study that said insects could be the answer to world hunger. And I was like, I think our dogs might like this. So I ordered some dry roasted crickets online, fed them to my dogs. The drool started right away. And I knew we had something that we could work with. So that's kind of going way back how this all got started. So from there, built out this kind of vision of what I thought we could do. And it did focus on sustainability within the pet industry initially. And I took it to one of my friends who he's actually a friend from high school who had done a bunch of startups because I live in San Francisco, so there's a lot of people that have worked in startups, and said, "Well, what do you think of this?" And he said, "I love it. I will be your first investor." And so that first $25,000 investment got us to our first product that we were able to test and market. So that's kind of how I started. And a lot of it was friends and family. So coming back to the original question, a lot of it was friends and family at the beginning. And then, as time has gone on, we just are finishing up a Series A right now. So it became more professional investors over time. And even though other things have changed, our focus no longer is solely on sustainability. What we've realized is that the insect protein provides real health benefits to the dogs. And, now when we talk to the consumers, we start with those health benefits, and the sustainability is the add on, it's the that means that we have no compromises.
Yeah, and I love that because, like, I mean, we said beforehand that, like, look, my big bugbear with the insect industry here and in Europe is that they focus too much on sustainability, which is like it's a good thing. I'm into sustainability. I'm an environmentalist, but it doesn't sell product. And look, we're in the business of selling product, and like whether you can have all the good intentions in the world and all the carbon saving emissions and methane emission saving in the world, but if you're not saving anything, you're not selling anything, you're not saving anything. So we need to focus on what makes people part with their money. And it's so important. I think it gets lost a lot to people that they go so far down the lane, and that everybody copies each other. There's this domino effect where one person is saying, right, we're sustainable, we're hypoallergenic, and then everyone's like, well, these are the USPs, and then everyone dominoes. But it's really dangerous for the industry because what ends up happening is you get lost in the midst, because then it's like, what is sustainable? Is fish sustainable? If it's Alaskan pollock, is that sustainable, or is it, or is it something else, or is it some weird type of like venison, like free roaming venison? Is that sustainable? And then you've got like a whole range of stuff because we don't have like a green light to red light system with like grades in between showing sustainability. It becomes very nondescript, and therefore it's very hard to pay for something that's nondescript. So I love the fact you're focusing on the health benefits, because there are huge health benefits with you feeding insects. And like cricket, for example, it's got like a really good omega-3, omega-6 content, like comparable to that of something like fish. But the problem with fish is, okay, it's not that sustainable, but forgetting that, a lot of dogs don't like the taste of fish. Some dogs love it, but a lot don't. Whereas I guarantee you, like, cricket is a hell of a lot more palatable than fish ever is, you know? So, and then, you know, like BSF, you've got like the lauric acid content, which is great for things like immune systems and metabolism. And this is what we should be focusing on. But this all comes back to education and the big problem I always have with category development is this that it's so dependent on actually educating the consumer, but also the people who are retailing. Because, you know, I've worked in the pet store. My parents had a pet store. I grew up in one. My girlfriend, she runs a pet store, and you can really influence people in a pet store by just talking through what their problems are and actually really getting down to the sort of meat and potatoes of, you know, why are you looking to change for dog food? What is it you're looking for? You know, it could be gut health. It could be my dog's old. He's always like just looking a little bit, you know, whatever. It could be a whole myriad of things, and giving stores that ability to assess and select the right products for that is just so crucial.
We've actually invested in a system, an online system, so that we can get that training out to more stores than we can physically visit. We still physically visit stores when it's possible. However, this system, it's called Retail Pet. We were able to upload videos, and most people like to consume this kind of training in video format. Um, but we've got the ability to put videos. We can put documents up there as well. But when I started it, you know, thinking through what is it that we should be training on, we've got a whole section at the beginning that is just about insect protein, and I started with the nutrition. And then there's also a module on sustainability. Again, it's the and. But then every single product, what is it about this product that makes it special? And when a consumer walks in the door, what are the things you should be listening for? Because those are the things that this product can help to solve. And really, you know, just taking a step back again, when I first was thinking about the insect protein, I was thinking about it as a protein replacement. And you know, it is equivalent. You know, when you look at a protein, you're looking for the essential amino acids. The insect protein delivers all of the essential amino acids that the dogs needs in the right quantities, and it's digestible. So when you compare it to, say, chicken or beef, it is absolutely equivalent. But what sets the insect protein really apart are the unique components that are found in insects and not found elsewhere. So things like the medium chain fatty acids, the lauric acid you were mentioning before, the antimicrobial peptides, the chitin, which is fiber. And those things are the things that lead to these additional health benefits that are so exciting. You know, I could talk about this all day, but you know, it's things like gut health through it's probiotic because of that fiber. It's addressing allergies in many dogs, especially atopic dermatitis. We're finding the newest studies are showing that it helps keep the moisture in the dog's skin. There's immune response and metabolism, as you mentioned, cognitive health from the lauric acid, arthritis, joint health. It can battle diarrhea because it actually goes after that particular bacteria in the dog's gut. And then oral health. The oral health benefits are amazing. And that actually led us to develop our latest product, which is a dental chew, really leaning into that health benefit.
I love how you guys are like actually focusing on what's important, and like it's like because that's the thing is that it's understanding. And again, I'm a big critic of a lot of pet food companies that are out there because they don't focus on what's important to the end consumer. And like, you can have a great story, and you can have, you know, great packaging, and you can have, a great brand strategy. But the reality is, unless you're like hitting a pain point, which the pet owners got, they're not going to buy your product, like, or they're not going to convert onto it, because converting people from one dog food to the other, it's not easy, and you need to actually have it. And again, all these benefits. What's great about the benefits of these insect protein dog foods is that this is all naturally part of the insect. You're not mixing together 50 different ingredients to get there. And then, and again, that's another thing people like miss, is that there's so many dog foods which are a page full of ingredients. And like the market's moving away from that. It's moving to more simple recipes, but better quality products within that recipe to actually give the benefits, but deliver them naturally. Because if you're giving a black soldier fly larvae and it's got all this good stuff in, the dog can get all that good stuff in and it will naturally digest it, rather than it being like this weird concoction which you're actually just like plopping into like a pellet.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to, this is why this is a natural food for the dogs. When you look at the wild dogs, it's basically how they maintain their health in the wild and get all of the nutrients that they need. So, I think it's extremely exciting, and I love that we are pushing forward on all of these different health benefits. One of the things that I've done just recently is write an article for the AHVMA journal, and that's the Journal for Holistic Veterinarians. And in that, those different topic areas that I just talked about, I run through all of those, but then show the studies that back up what we're talking about. And I think that's just so important, to be able to show that these are peer-reviewed studies that have been done with the dogs that are proving out the benefits that we're talking about. It's not a marketing thing. It is real. We're backing it up with the science.
And that the pet industry is full of urban legends around nutrition, as I'm sure you're aware. I mean, the you can't feed raw with kibble. That's one which has like been around for years, and it's nonsense. Like and it's so important. Look, we live in an age of information. We can show the information. We can show and so to actually be able to put that in front of people and say, look, these are peer reviewed studies. This is a real thing, as opposed to, oh yeah, guy from the pet shop down the road, he said this, and that sounds feasible, like. But that's kind of how information used to be translated. But we're so far beyond that. And again, it's like people are a lot more discerning. Look, I mean, this is why there's popular TikTok channels like reviewing dog foods. There's popular, information just everywhere at different corners of the internet. So whatever we put out there in terms of information when it comes to health related benefits, we have to be sure. And I love the detail that you're actually going into to make sure that these marks are hit, because like if we're not selling things for what they are, then the whole thing is going to collapse on us at some point.
One of the things I'm really proud about is, we were talking investment before. One of our large investors in this latest round is Vane, which is the Veterinary Angel Network. It's the largest investment that they've made. And I attribute that to how we've leaned into the studies and have been able to show them what we're seeing in the insect protein, and they see the benefits and they're excited about it.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome, man. Like, because I'll be honest with you, look, I don't know the American context when it comes to veterinarians, but what I do know is that veterinarians over here, they get taught certain things as they go through veterinary college, and it's very hard to actually then bring new information to the fore, because they're busy, they're flat out working all the time, and you say, oh, cricket based dog food, that's fantastic, and they're like, well, I ain't got time to look at that, or do you know what I mean, or whatever the product
That's
is.
new. How can it possibly be good?
Exactly. Well, it's like, and even if it is, I haven't got time to look at that, because it would mean reading 10, 15, 20 different studies And like, I'm not being funny. I work from like 8 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, and I'm absolutely shattered at the end of the day. And I'm not reading your studies, but to actually get like a solid board behind you, not just behind you, but actually investing in your company.
Yeah, that it was super rewarding to have that happen. The other thing is, we did start with the holistic vets because they tend to embrace natural solutions. You know, when we started the education on the vet front, but and I've got to say the AHVMA has been fantastic. You know, this journal article is one thing, but in their last annual meeting, they had me come in and I did 3 hours as part of their education curriculum. The first was sort of a history of use on insects. The second was a deep dive in nutrition. And the third hour was about sustainability. And that, you know, for that to be part of the education curriculum is exciting.
And like, that's the thing is that like, how did you find yourself getting into these situations? Because like you're saying, like the amount of like great like endorsements you've got. I mean, just getting in front of these people must be hard in the first place, let alone for them to say, look, come in and present something because we're loving what you're doing. I mean, how did that go from I'm making dog treats at home to like I'm presenting to like all these like highfalutin vets? I mean, I think that's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, especially because I don't have a PhD. I'm, you know, I do have my name on studies, and that's what allows me to, you know, get up and talk in those forums. But, you know, I think partly it is, you know, as I've gone through growing this company, one of the things I've done is I've tried to partner wherever possible with different groups in order to take it to the next level. So when we were first starting out, we had Iowa State working with us to prove out the digestibility of the cricket protein. And then I worked with a company called Animal Biome to help us really look at the prebiotic nature of the insect protein. And so pulling in experts like that and having those great relationships, opportunities open up. You know, somebody will say, "Oh, well, I spoke at this conference. I think they'd really like to hear what you have to say." And it just snowballs from there.
No, it's brilliant. Like I love it. I love how deeply entrenched you've got into this. But again, I think you come from it all in the right way. I mean, I think you have to come in like I'm an obsessive. Whenever I have a product, I have to go super deep into it to like the nth degree. Even if it's not my field, I'm like, right, I need to understand every single angle about this product before I even talk about selling it. But I think there's a lot of people who don't do that. They're just like, this is a product. Okay, they're doing that. Slap these labels on it, whack it on the shelf, and hope it sells. Whereas I love that you're super deep in every single angle of it to the point where you're talking to like vet society of like people just explaining the nutrition and stuff. It's very much how I feel about stuff. So but it seems like you're even deeper than me on that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm not good at doing a superficial level. I have to go deep because you know I feel like if I am going to be in that position and somebody asks me a question, I need to be able to answer the question. And so I just keep on going a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, and it's kind of crazy at this point how deep I've gone. But I do love it. And it's all because I believe this needs to happen. And I believe we're making a difference. And honestly, coming back to it, I absolutely believe in the sustainability of it as well. So, you know, when I think back on that conversation with my daughter, I feel like we're making a difference. And to me, that is the most important thing.
No, and like to have a strong Northern Star is important. And I think like it's just making sure that that Northern Star doesn't blind you in terms of like understanding how you get to that Northern Star. I think people have the North Star and they go, right, sustainability, but then everything has to be about sustainability to get there. Whereas the realities are is you're not selling to yourself. You're selling to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, all who have different priorities. and you need to change their mind on what their buying habits are. Um, and that reason isn't going to be the same as you, because look, I have, different priorities, and you have different priorities, and we have to sell to people based on their priorities. So
And that was a hard thing to come to, I gotta say, because I was so focused on sustainability for the first few years to realize that we had to pivot and really think about the health side of this, because that's where consumers were going to come in. Just realizing that the sustainability, even though they gave lip service to it, it's not the primary reason why they're going to make a decision. So, really thinking about, well, what is that decision? What does that decision process look like? And where do we have to meet them?
and I think that I probably say this more than I should, but I do think there's disconnect sometimes between brands and consumers in terms of understanding, like when a consumer walks into a store, what actually influences their decisions to buy a product. And we talk about product market fit in offices and that sort of stuff, but sometimes you just need to stand in front of somebody and say, okay, what are you looking for in a dog food? And they'll tell you what their problems are. And then you need to explain why your product is the right product for them. And a lot of the time, you quickly realize you can't just stand there and say sustainability, sustainability, because they're going to be like, I don't care. Or like, all right, but that, what else, And I think like, it's, we end up in echo chambers if we're not careful. And to come out of that realization is actually quite hard. And look, that's why I love doing retail shows still, and being in the pet store if I can. Like, if people won't kick me out, I mean, I like to walk around pet stores all the time and just talk to the customers. Even though I'm not working there, I sometimes sell them certain products when I shouldn't actually be doing that, because I'm walking around. They'll talk to me about their dog, and I'll say, "Oh, you need to use this, that, and the other." But it keeps me understanding what's driving people and what they're happy to spend their money on. And these things are something we can become quite detached from if we're not careful.
I had a little bit of an epiphany by just, I took one afternoon and I sat down and read reviews. And we have thousands of reviews if you look at, between Amazon, Chewy, our own website. And in doing it, I started to like take the review as I was reading them, put them into different buckets to understand what were the consumers saying? Why did they love the product? What was it about the product that was compelling to them? And in doing that, I found some funny things that we're using in our marketing now. Things like my dog doesn't fart anymore. And and what a big problem that was for some people. Like, they couldn't even have people to their house because it was so bad. And the fact that, because the insect protein is prebiotic, it really helps with the gut health, and that is one of the ways that it shows up. So, thinking about things like that, and doing that social listening, I think is another way to get at it. I love the idea of walking through the stores, but physically, I just, or time wise, I don't have time to go do it. But I do have time to sit down and read a bunch of reviews.
And look, I think reviews are like they're very you have to take some of them with a pinch of salt for sure, but like it is very revealing. It is very revealing as well. And like, I think again, it's very easy to sit in your glass house and say, this is amazing. Everyone tells me it's amazing. Like, the people who work for me say it's amazing. Everybody I meet says it's amazing. And then you look at reviews and you're like, do you know? And sometimes you need to take the slaps just to get better, because it's very easy to just keep on going and saying, I'm not going to change because, but yourself, the world changes continuously, and we have to keep upping our game. We have to keep innovating, and we also have to deal with problems, and that's the only way we get better.
Well, and even stupid little problems, like we had, in reading the reviews, I realized, our early bag of our food, the zipper kept breaking, and people were writing about, I love this food, except the zipper broke, and I'd be like, oh no, what is going on? And so we, in our latest production runs, we switched out the bags, and now we have this kind of like Velcro kind of zipper that it just works. And I was like, okay, one more thing, sort of. let's let's get that out of the way. But it's even little stuff like that that is an annoyance that people talk about.
Yeah, and look, if somebody's prepared to write about it on the internet, it's obviously annoying them, right? And and like it may sound ridiculous, like in isolation, the zipper broke, but actually, if you've got like your dog food on the side and you like to keep it like you want to keep the insects out, you might be somewhere which is hot, or your dog. Yeah, exactly, and like it's actually a big deal, but you don't even think about these things. So I think the beauty of like reviews like that are outstanding, to be honest. And it's great that you've got the proactiveness to actually then look at these and actually go, yeah, well, actually, I can see that.
Yeah, yeah. And I realized, oh, that's happened to me too. And I just ignored it because I was like, no big deal. I put it in a bucket anyway. But,
Yeah, not everyone does. Not everyone does actually. And I don't know, like you see like information about how you shouldn't put dog food in a bucket because of the plastic. The best way is to keep it already sealed in the original packaging, and or like some people, you know maybe they just don't have space for a bucket and they've just got their 5 pound bag on the shelf or something, and it's important for them.
lots of different ways of doing it, right?
So obviously you've expanded your range enormously over time. Um, yeah, I mean, tell me, like, you started with treats, like, but where have you moved to? Like, because obviously treats, then the food, right, and then
Well, it actually started, we started with biscuits. So we started just baking with the insect protein, and partly because just trying to think about like how to work with the insect protein, because we weren't sure, was it going to absorb the liquids when we put it in? How was it going to bake? And then we went from there to a soft and chewy training treat, because one of the things we recognized was that while we were doing great with big dogs, there were a lot of little dogs that didn't really like the crunchy treat. So we decided to do a training treat, and actually, when I do a product, I'm really thinking about how is that product going to be used. And so when we developed the training treat, I went to a guy who is a friend of mine, Ian Dunbar, who's been writing books on training for since the 1970s, believe it or not. And he told us what he looked for in a training treat. And so when we were designing the training treat, we used that criteria, low calorie, under 3 calories a treat. It should be soft enough so that you can break it into smaller pieces because you're going to be treating so many times. Yet you don't want it to be crumbly. Your fingers shouldn't be greasy. It's all those different things that go into the functional design. So we think about the functional design as we're doing it. And, I think we have done a fantastic job hitting the nail on the head with each of the products that we've launched. We then we finished all of the science and had the GRAS certification. So we were able to then launch the food. And then from there, we have launched a dental chew. And actually, that came a little bit through discovery. So when I first launched the food, I had the Craven Cricket and the Good Grub. So one is with the BSFL and the other's with the cricket protein. And I put my two dogs on one was on one food, one was on the other. And my older dog happened to be on the Good Grub. And after he'd been on it for about 3 years, I was sitting down in our back room and he was like, of course, in my face, breathing on me and licking me. And I was like, he has really great breath. And then I opened up his mouth and looked at his teeth, and his teeth were white. And what I was seeing was the impact that the grub protein, the BSFL, was having on his oral microbiome. And so that study that came out on oral health confirmed everything that we were seeing in my dog. And so the black soldier fly larva reduces the bad bacteria in the mouth, increases the good, and reduces breath odor. So we leaned into that to make our dental chews that we just launched. They've been out for just about a year right now. And what I love about it is they're very different than any other dental chew that's on the market, because it's leaning into this true benefit of the insect protein, to work on the oral microbiome.
Because I didn't. I'll be honest with you. Obviously, I spend a lot of time around BSFL, and I didn't. I never really put the two and two together, if I'm honest. Because obviously, I'm aware of like the medium chain fatty acids and the you know like the bio. Um, I forget what the name is off the top of my head. I'm always, but there's a lot going on, and like the help it gives. But I never even considered the oral health side of it. If I'm honest, I always think about the stomach, the bowels, like how it digests the food. I never really even thought about
Yeah, well,
the oral
it
health
looks
side
like
of
we're
it.
going
To
to be
be
able to
honest,
put an
so
oral claim onto our food as well, from this study. So very exciting. And oral health really matters when if you look at the overall health of your dog. There was a study that just came out that said 73% of dogs in the US have oral health issues. And those oral health issues, if left to untreated, they can develop into really serious health issues for the dog and can shorten their life. So from my perspective, this is an excellent place for us to lean in on what we're seeing in the studies, to promote a product.
and also look, older dogs. It's a big problem because if you have to get your dogs cleaned, as if you've got a 10-year-old dog and you have to get its teeth cleaned, they have to go under sedation. They run the risk of like not waking up. It's dangerous. It's expensive, and if we can like combat this sort of stuff just through their feeding like patterns, but surely that's a massive win, and actually doing the studies for this is so important. Like, yeah, no, I'm very impressed. If I'm honest with you, I'm very impressed.
It's exciting. I think that's one of the really exciting benefit areas to explore. But there are so many different benefit areas that we're exploring right now, because of those things I talked about before, the medium chain fatty acids, which is really what's impacting the oral health. The antimicrobial peptides are just that impacts immunity in the dog, and basically keeps your dog healthy long term. So there's these things matter, and they're exciting. And I just I whenever I talk to anybody who's working in an industry who has the ability to run studies, I'm like, okay, this is the next thing that we're seeing. Let's go after this. Let's see whether I'll give you a hint into one that I'm excited about. Whether weight management is, if the chitin is really adhering to lipids and taking them out of the body, because it looks like that's what's happening from a scientific perspective. Fantastic. Let's prove it. So things like that. And it's funny. I look at those things too, and I say that those benefits might be the benefits that bring humans on board with eating insects. Because if you think about like weight management, yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, it sounds better than the Zempic anyway. So it's it's
A natural solution versus one that's a little scary.
yeah, exactly. But no, that's fascinating. I mean, it's interesting to see where it can all go, because that's the thing is I think the big problem the insect industry is trying to because obviously insect protein is much more expensive than traditional proteins. I mean, you compare it to something like chicken, which is a byproduct of the laying industry. That's a very cheap protein, and so we need to, as an industry, like show why we're doing this and why you shouldn't just go for what's cheapest. Because look, price is an issue, but people, it's a cost of living crisis. We all need, we need things to be less expensive. But if we can show real claims, showing like if the oral health claim.
from having to spend somewhere else because of the benefits that we're seeing. That's fantastic. But I actually believe that the insect protein over time will become competitive from a price perspective. You know, if you look at the feed conversion ratio, it's better than traditional protein. So, you know, our problem right now is that traditional protein is subsidized in many cases. So, you know, we're basically up against these established subsidized industries that aren't very humane. And you know, at some point in the future, this will all change as this becomes more and more established.
And look, I can say from like obviously from an insect producing side, we are trying to change that. There is a strong recognition that the current pricing structure of insects needs to go down a lot. And look, we're working continuously on technology to do that. And I think just trying to refine getting a better product market fit with the prices, because as we drop the prices, there's more and more things we can do with the product, which make a lot more sense. But when you're up against something like soy, for example, let's say the bottom end, which is basically being created on the devastation of like land in the Corrado and places like that, it's very hard to compete against that. But we need to get there, and like it's building out, because again the problem always is we can grow the insect protein, but our problem our side is who we selling it to. And that's why as an industry we need like the pet food market to be successful, we need the wild bird food market to be successful, then we need to move into aquaculture. And just gradually as we increase our production, we lower our prices and we get better at it. And but it's jumping from like the very small production we currently have to where we need to be. And
Scale matters. It really does. And then the other thing is, you know, in the US, we've got a new partner that is coming in, and they're using an industrial symbiosis model. And that to me is exciting as well, because over time it will help to bring the costs down, but it also is even more sustainable because you know you're not having to truck feed in. The feed comes directly in a pipe in wet form. It doesn't have to be dried before it comes over, so less you know, less resources there. It's you know, the plant is getting run off of the steam that comes off of a building right next door. So you know, all of those things make it even more sustainable and will help over time to bring the costs down.
I mean, a lot of the model I work on actually is on that side of it, if I'm honest, because the moment you put it in a truck and move it 5 minutes down the road, you've added a couple of $100s to the truck, you know, and like to the process. And then if you take on BSF, for example, there's a 4.5 to 1 conversion. So, and let's say it costs you $20 a pallet, which is hardly anything. But by the time that then turns into protein, that's like $90 extra just for moving it 5 minutes down the road. And then if we're looking at like setting, like if you can set up somewhere which is already producing food byproducts, but they have, let's say, already have an anaerobic digestion plant, you can use that energy they're producing from unusable stuff, and just having that whole thing. But that is the future for sure, and that's what we're working on in terms of making things work, because every little penny matters at the ingredient stage, because obviously it feeds up, and we can't afford to have our end product a cent dearer than what it needs to be, because you know we need scale, and with scale will come a bigger and bigger market. And also look, if you could pay the same price for black soldier fly protein or cricket protein as you do for, as let's say Nestle do for a chicken or beef or whatever, that gives you a completely, it means that it should, with the education, really take those other proteins to task, you know.
Well, it's exciting because, you know, right now I have to price it as a premium product, and if my cost of goods come down, I can start to bring the cost to the consumer down, and of course that will increase the amount of people that come on board.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So like what's the new product? So I saw you doing a wet food now as well, or
We did a wet food. We decided to back off on the wet food. The uptake on it was a little slower. I think we might have put too many things into it all at once that were new to the consumer because we put it in a Tetra Pak as well. And so I think maybe one too many things. That is the first product that we discontinued of all the products that we've created. But I do think in the future we will probably go there again, but maybe we'll just use a different packaging that's not, as foreign to the consumer. So we'll have to think about that into, where do we go with that?
yeah, I think it was. I mean, look, in Europe, Tetra Pak is actually relatively normal, but I know in America,
It's still not.
no, it's still not that common. It's still very much a can society, isn't it?
It really is, and it's a shame though because I really do love the Tetra Pak from coming back to sustainability. It's so lightweight. To move it around when you ship it, it's flat. It's crazy, and also when you fill it, when you actually have the product, there's no empty space on the truck. When you're shipping cans, you're shipping a lot of air as well. So there's just a lot of benefits.
Yeah, and also like I think cans get damaged easier as well, and I just think like Tetra Paks are just a nicer thing, but everything is about the long period of acceptance and consumers getting used to using new products. I mean, and again, look, 10 years ago, who'd have thought that? I mean, I think you guys have won numerous awards this year already in terms of you know innovation, company growth, this sort of stuff. So who'd have thought that 10 years ago about an insect dog food company?
Yeah, no, I'm actually really proud. We've got, I think we 4 different awards this year. Innovation award on the Good Grub dog food, an award on the dental chews, one on one of our training treats, and then the Inc. 5000. Yeah.
No, that's what I mean. And you think 10 years ago, who'd have thought that about an insect-based dog food company?
Well, if you go far enough back and would have told me that I'd, have founded a insect protein dog food company, I'd be like, "What? You're smoking something."
So exactly, but because your growth is so like big at the moment, like you've had great year-on-year growth. How do you keep that going? Because I think the danger with growth is, and high growth is, how do you stop that from plateauing, and then once you get into that plateau, it becomes very hard. Then it's like I always say, selling products or creating the market is like pushing a boulder up a hill, and you push it up for ages, and then it rolls, and it just picks up its own speed. But the danger is it hits the bottom of the hill again.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, what's interesting is we actually slowed down our growth in the last year and a half. And we did it very intentionally. We pulled back on all the marketing spend because the market kind of shifted on us and it became focused on unit economics. And so we took a step back and said, okay, we need to look at each and every one of the channels that we're in. We need to look at every single one of our products. And we need to look to see if our margins are where we need them to be in each of those different places. And we made a lot of hard decisions through that. We changed where we were producing some of our products. We we were able to actually change our contribution margin significantly, a 29-point swing during that time. Now, while we did that, we pulled back on that marketing spend as well, and the growth slowed. But the interesting thing is, it didn't stop. So it grew organically. And what that enabled us to do is to really take a look at that marketing spend as well and say, okay, if it's going to grow organically, where is the best place for us to put the dollars going into the future? And so we've really had a look at that as well and made some new choices, and we're about to step on the gas again. So luckily it didn't roll downhill.
Yeah, and the thing is I think like with marketing, like I've done a hell of a lot of marketing, but I think the problem always is that when you're on that high growth budget, you kind of throw a lot of things against the wall, and because things are going well, you don't necessarily question what the most important things are you're doing and what's really beneficial, and also where things are going well, you maybe don't question your supply chain like you should, or who you're selling to like you should, and is this actually the right direction for my business? And for to actually then come back and say, okay, we're going to reevaluate everything. Uh, that takes a huge amount of courage, if not anything else, because it's the fear is that if you pull back from anything, that growth will stop, and then you're scared of getting it going again. But the fact it's carried on is impressive.
Yeah, and it carried on. It wasn't the same slope, right? But it did continue to grow. The it is funny, because yeah, it was very scary, but we felt like we needed to understand what our baseline looked like. And then the the other thing, I used to work for big companies, and we used to say, I know 10% of my marketing dollars are effective. I just don't know which 10%. And that is, kind of like the basis for everybody. That, we're spending here, we're spending there. What's working? It's hard to tell. You know, it can't be. It's really hard to attribute it directly, unless it's, I guess, some of the DTC, you can see a direct cause and effect.
Although there is that whole thing where people need to see you in a few locations to get trust in you. So like, you know, they see you, let's say on Chewy, they'll see you in a pet store, and then they'll see, let's say, a D2C based ad, and then they'll go, oh, I've seen this in a few places, and they're offering me a deal.
And here's the newest twist on that. The world has changed. TikTok plays a huge role now. And when if you look at what's happening on TikTok, you can sell your products on TikTok now, and but the way it's done is from consumers reviewing products. So it's social proof that this is a product that you should buy, as opposed to the brand, promoting or making their own videos. So it's a really different world that we're living in, and understanding how to navigate that is sort of the next step.
And look, I mean, I I talked to Randy Williams, who's from We Grow Co, about influencer marketing. He was talking about like how the marketing area is changing massively because like SEO now has obviously being affected by AI in Google, and like how it's not working anymore, and then talking about influencers and then TikTok shop and that sort of stuff, and keeping ahead of this all the time. It's so important, but it's hard, and it's like it's because the trouble is people become an SEO specialist, and then it's like, well, then SEO is not important anymore, and then it's like, okay, well, then what do I do now? It would be like being a Windows 98 repair guy today. It's like it doesn't have any function, or I fix VCRs for a living, and like TVs. It's like no one does that anymore. Do you know what I mean? But it's like you have to continuously keep changing your attack because the world is fast moving. How we connect with people is so different, and it's finding the right routes to that. So
Yeah, I think it's just watching, where is the attention going? Where is the consumer's attention, and trying to really follow that and understand that.
let's finish on like a lighter note. Have you got any amusing stories from your time selling insect-based dog food? Because come on, there must be some. It's such a wacky thing to be doing.
It is wacky, and yeah, though I've had lots of different weird things go on over the years, getting called Cricket Girl and things like that. Um, I think some of the things lately that have been kind of amusing are, uh, it's a little bit of a political reaction, which I wasn't anticipating. Like, who would have thought dog food could be political?
Oh, it is. It really is. It really is.
But I was called a commie hippie, and I thought that was really interesting and weird. But
Well, I've been told before that I'm being funded by the WEF and Klaus Schwab, and that I'm trying to make everybody eat insects, and that I must be making a lot of money out of it, which is absolutely hilarious.
yeah, a little, it's ludicrous. It really is. No, but as far as like fun stuff, what's really fun is seeing the reaction of consumers now versus when I first started. I went to UC Berkeley. I live in Berkeley, so I'm really close here. And I got asked to go and talk to one of the classes over there. And walking into a class with these younger consumers, they're about to become consumers, and seeing their reaction was super exciting. They'd all heard of it before. I wasn't starting from scratch, and they were all excited about it, and they were telling me what insects they'd already eaten, and how they can't wait to take it back to their parents' dog, or I'm going to get a dog as soon as I graduate. It's that kind of conversation.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So, and this was wicked. If people want to get in touch with Jimny's, what's the best way of doing it? And
The website, always the best way. Jiminies.com, JIMINYS.com.
awesome. Really appreciate you coming on. I've absolutely loved this conversation and love where you're going and everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Clayton. It's really fun to be able to talk to you.
All right. Thanks a million.